Welcome to episode number 25 of Hoop Talk Fanatics. I am here with the managing editor for Philadelphia Sports Network, Zach, and we are here to talk about what the Sixers have been doing during this offseason and what Zach's thoughts are on the Summer League and everything else. So welcome.
Oh, thanks for the welcome there, Alex. Appreciate the opportunity to join you, talk a little Sixers basketball. So I'm excited for it.
My first question is, what were your thoughts on draft night with the Sixers picks?
Yeah, so draft night was interesting, and as Sixers fans, many are so used to draft night being this big affair where we heavily pay attention to the lottery, and though we're a few years removed from that, we still remember how that is. And it was kind of the complete opposite this past draft night, right? They had the 23rd pick. As the picks wound down, a lot of the players that Philadelphia fans were thinking about that were being mocked towards the Sixers, they were taken off the board. So when you get to 23 and the news comes in that a trade's been made, it's definitely interesting. And so again, to summarize the trade, it's DeAnthony Melton from the Grizzlies came to Philadelphia for Danny Green and the 23rd overall pick. And it's funny that you asked me about that, because I was actually going through some papers in my office earlier today, and I found a list of names that I made at the beginning of the offseason. Okay. Mm-hmm. Different trade, different targets for Philadelphia. And right smack dab in the middle, in the biggest writing of any other player's names. I even have the list right here with me. Mm-hmm. DeAnthony Melton, right? And next to it, I have the words written pipe dream, because that's how unlikely I thought it was that the Sixers were going to be able to land Melton from the Grizzlies. So for him to be traded to Philadelphia just for 23 in a weak draft and Danny Green, I absolutely loved that. And then if you follow that up with the undrafted signings, of course, Michael Foster Jr., who had a good game last night, Justin Champagny on a two-way contract, and Aminu Muhammad. That's right. Yes. Just really just great. Overall, I think, considering what they went into the night with, that it's A+. They couldn't have done any better, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about Memphis getting Danny Green, and with the Sixers getting their newest addition in DeAnthony Melton?
Yeah, so for Memphis, listen, I think Philadelphia came away with the better side of the deal, purely just on the fact that Melton is a significantly more impactful player this year than the combination of David Roddy from Memphis, who they drafted at 23, and also Danny Green. That's not to say that this isn't a good deal for Memphis, right? So they had a little bit of a logjam, clearly. Obviously, Ja Morant needs major minutes. Ja Morant does for the Memphis Grizzlies. They knew they were going to bring back Tyus Jones. He did end up re-signing later on. So for DeAnthony Melton, who is kind of an undersized combo guard, you're just not going to have the minutes necessary to really get the most out of him. And that's something that they even saw last year. Even though he did improve once again, he's ready for an even bigger role, which I think he'll have in Philadelphia. So as far as Memphis' side, I do think that getting Danny Green is helpful for them, right? Because Danny Green is an extraordinary veteran. He's a great locker room presence. He was that for Philadelphia. Say what you want about Danny Green and over his Philadelphia 76ers tenure, he was a great leader, especially in the locker room. So I think for a young Memphis team, he's going to be a great leader for them as well. I'm very glad that his contract is seemingly guaranteed. And, the real reason being because of the injury that he sustained during the playoffs with the Philadelphia 76ers. It's not just about the money that he would potentially miss out on, or in this case seems to be getting, but the access to team medical facilities. So I think it's a deal that really worked out for everybody. Memphis gets a young prospect they like in David Roddy, who's an absolute motor of a human being. Fantastic. We saw him in last night's Summer League game. They get a veteran presence in Danny Green. The Sixers get Melton. And on top of that, Danny Green has a home in the NBA where he can continue to just work on his rehab, which is kind of the most important thing right now for Green. Now, to get to your second part of the question with DeAnthony Melton, what's not to love about him for the Philadelphia 76ers, right? There's been so much made of what's needed on this team, and that's the aggressive dog mentality. Well, check that box. DeAnthony Melton has that, right? This team has had rebounding issues. DeAnthony Melton is a fantastic, not even considering his size at 6'2", but like forget that he's undersized. He's a fantastic rebounder for a guard. So to have that's another box you can check right there. He's a solid shooter from the outside. I want to say he made right around 37%, 37.4% from three last year. So just really good percentage from the outside on solid volume for Melton last year on 5 per game. So on top of that, he's not like Chris Paul as a playmaker. But he's a more than capable playmaker. And that's something that Philadelphia also ran into issues with. It's just having the playmaking depth. So to see Melton as an addition there, he's a bit of a ball hawk defensively. He's athletic. He's long. He checks just about every single box that Philadelphia needs. There's nothing not to like about this deal for Philly.
So what were your thoughts on the UDFA signs that the Sixers picked up?
Yeah, so a lot of interesting names. Let's start with Michael Foster Jr., right? So coming into the G League season last year, he was one of the more recognizable names, potentially well thought of in terms of how the draft goes. So he did not have the year that many expected, including himself. Obviously, that's why he ended up being undrafted. But even with that being said, he's just 19 years old, a young 19. On top of that, he's very athletic, good size for a modern power forward, really just solid defensively. And he's got a solid 7+ foot wingspan. There's a great profile to him, a player profile to his measurables, what he potentially is going to be able to do long term. Obviously, he's going to have to consistently work on the shot. That's pretty much true with about 90% of undrafted free agents, and let alone most players in the draft. Even we've still seen that's a need for Jaden Springer to work on too, as he now approaches his second year. So definitely needs to work on expanding his range consistently. On top of that, like he just has tremendous potential to affect just about every facet. I don't know if there's that star potential, though. I never like doubting young players, and it's not overly often. But second round picks, undrafted players, they've certainly proven scouts wrong before. Michael Foster Jr. has about as good a chance as any in the undrafted pool, just with the unteachable traits that he has, the athleticism, things of that nature, size. And so I think there's a lot to be excited about with him. Definitely an exciting young player who already has had a solid summer league, just one game in. But in addition to him, so Justin Champagny, right? So I keep calling him Justin. Julian. The reason I keep calling him Justin is because Julian has a brother whose name is Justin. He played for the Raptors G League team last season, but Julian, who actually is with the Philadelphia 76ers, just about, I talked about everything in DeAnthony Melton that kind of makes him the ideal addition to the Sixers. Well, Julian kind of has that at the wing spot. All right. Now, none of it is as polished as it is with Melton, but he, in the past, though he saw a downtick last season with St. John, solid 3-point shooter. Over his college career, it came out at 34.8%, but he had 38% just in his sophomore year. He's a volume shooter to defensive instincts, strong physical athletic body. There's a player in there somewhere, and I think this is the kind of player who he's going to be around for more than just this year. I think this is a 2-way contract that could work into into a guaranteed contract on the 15-man roster next season. So to have a player such as him, and I personally covered the Bluecoats. I did last season in depth on their finals run. I'm looking forward to doing the same again this season. So to see him down in Delaware and occasionally in Philadelphia, I'm absolutely looking forward to it. And then there's Aminu Mohammed, who not too many are overly familiar with Muhammad, although he actually played at Georgetown. So solid school name right there. You know, big school in his history. But Muhammad has so many of the traits that you really want in a two guard. So he's got solid size. We talked about Melton being a dog. Absolutely, Muhammad is just so fierce, so competitive, you know, so defensively involved. The only, I don't even want to say issue, but the most underdeveloped part of his game, I should phrase it, is his jump shot. If you can have him, and he had done okay through in catch and shoot situations last season with Georgetown, but you want to see him be able to add consistency to that, to be able to create his shot a little more. But he's only 20 years old as well. So still a younger player, still has time to develop that. I'm really hoping that he shows something in the summer league. Then hopefully he can latch on to Philadelphia. There's only so many two-way contracts is the problem. Right now, Charlie Brown Jr. and Julian Champagny, they have the two. Now, with other great players, you know, Aminu Mohammad's a great candidate. Michael Foster Jr., although he already has an NBA contract with the Sixers, could that be converted? Possible, not likely, I'd say. Grant Riller, huge fan of Grant Riller in his game. He had a great game last night. Potential two-way candidate. So if they decide to switch it up a little bit on their two ways, there is a chance Aminu Mohammed could steal a two-way spot from probably Charlie Brown Jr. But I got to say, I'm a big fan of his game, and if he can get the shot right, that's an absolute NBA player right there.
So in between those couple of guys that you mentioned, who do you think will make the biggest impact for the squad?
This year or in general?
Yeah, this year. Yeah, this year.
Yeah. So the only player who, and it's tough because the Sixers, as much as they're attempting to be contenders, right? They are in a unique spot where they do have a lot of young talent. If you look at Isaiah Joe, Charles Bassey, Paul Reed, Shake Milton, who could still be considered their Jaden Springer, and you look at, well, there's only so many minutes that are going to go to those younger guys, right? So when you talk about who's going to have the most impact for the Philadelphia 76ers, it's likely that you're probably going to have to go with Michael Foster Jr. just because he seems to have already had a spot on the actual 15-man roster. If he keeps that spot, he's likely to lead all of those undrafted players in minutes for the Philadelphia 76ers. Though I definitely don't want to rule out Julian Champagny because just with that wing position, there is potentially so much need for extra minutes there. We saw last year, actually, when Charlie Brown Jr. spent some time up with Philadelphia while he was on the two-way with the Sixers last year. So potentially could be another situation such like that. The Sixers having PJ Tucker, George Niang, Tobias Harris, Embiid, Reed, Bassey, another big man like Michael Foster may not be needed, but you have to give him the vote just leader in the clubhouse right now for most impactful, just because he's the only one that has a clear path to minutes right now in terms of current investment from the 76ers.
What do you think about Jaden Springer, and how long do you think he'll actually be available to play in the starting lineup?
That's a great question. So Jaden Springer, and I was a fan of Springer when he was drafted even. I know there's a lot of controversy around that. People saying, you know, he should have traded up for Bones Highland or gone later for Ayo Sumu. And it's not an exact science that goes into the later picks in the draft. And you can't just point out the concept of a player and you know for sure that draft pick's going to hit. Otherwise, that player would be drafted earlier than the late 20s. So with Jaden Springer, I actually appreciate the mentality that Daryl Morey showed when he did make that selection. And that was who is going to be potentially the most valuable asset, period. Right. It's a similar mindset he had when he selected Tyrese Maxey just the year before. So Jaden Springer, very, very, very impressive defender when he's locked in. Right. We saw it just last night when he was defending Xavier Tillman, and he actually met him in the air and was able to. He didn't just block the shot; he grabbed the ball right out of Tillman's hands. It was unbelievable. Just to watch it live was so exciting. So, as a defender, when he's truly engaged, I think he's already ready to contribute at the NBA level. The biggest question with him is offensively, not just the jump shot, which we know to be lacking, but in addition to that, he's a fine facilitator, but he's not an overly great playmaker at this standpoint. And we saw that in the final play of last night's game, and the eventual turnover that sealed the game for Memphis, right? So once he kind of buttons that up and cleans that up a little bit, I think he probably needs another year of good G League action, although he could probably see 20 plus games in Philadelphia this season, where he averages about 10 or more minutes a game. Now, as far as the starting lineup, I mean, that's just kind of tough in general, just because Tyrese Maxey and James Harden, by all appearances, are going to be here for quite some time. But if we kind of change the question to until he's a starting caliber player, I say probably, if not next year, the year after, he's a plus starting player in the NBA. And the way I've always kind of thought of him is a less engaged Marcus Smart, which when you kind of have that qualifier, it's like, okay, so you mean not Marcus Smart? And the answer is kind of. But when you look at guards at a comparable size, he's more athletic than Smart. He's kind of built in a similar way. He almost kind of looks like a football player, the way that he's built. He's so strong, just when you look at him. So he profiles to be a very impressive defender at the NBA level. It's just however long it takes him to get the offense sorted, that's going to dictate when he's ready to play even just a meaningful role for an NBA team, let alone becoming a starter. But I have faith in Jaden Springer.
What will you be looking for in tonight's game against Utah?
Right. So actually, I've been all over the place today. The one thing that I really want to see, I'm trying just to confirm that he's actually going to be in, but if Trevelin Queen is actually playing, which he may not, just because he's still reconditioning. That's why he missed last night's game. So if Trevelin Queen is playing, it's absolutely him. So he was the G League MVP last season, absolutely killed the Delaware Bluecoats on their trip to the finals. The Rio Grande Vipers, who the team that Trevelin Queen played for, they actually were the ones who defeated the Bluecoats in the finals, swept them 2-0 out of the 3-game series. So two-way wing. Listen, we talked about the type of player that the Sixers need. It's that aggressive, competitive, hyper competitive even, and that's Trevelin Queen. 3-point shot is a little shaky, but when it's on, and just an out the gym athlete. So I definitely would be interested in seeing more from him. The other player who I love watching him play, it's Grant Riller. He signed with the Sixers 2-way contract last year. Fortunately, due to a couple different injuries towards his labrum and his meniscus on 2 separate occasions, it didn't work out in Philly. Didn't really work out in Delaware. Only played, I think, 4 games with the Bluecoats. Now he has a chance to kind of show the league, what he can really do. And I've had the chance to speak to Riller on a few different occasions. An absolute, he's just a great guy. But on top of that, he has an exciting skill set. And we talked about some of Springer's shortcomings offensively, where he's not an overly adept playmaker. He struggles shooting a little bit. And those weaknesses in Springer, Grant Riller has that ability and then some. He's actually an incredibly exciting shooter. He's a much better athlete than a lot of people may remember. We even saw a little bit about that last night, but definitely for me, it's about Trevelin Queen and about Grant Riller. If Queen plays, definitely Queen. either way, I'm going to be watching really closely just because I think he's another guy that could push for a two-way spot if it becomes available in Philadelphia, or even potentially if they decide that they want a third point guard and they think that either Shake Milton no longer can serve that role or they don't want him to. They want him to serve another role in the team, whatever the case may be. I think that there is potentially a path for Grant Riller signing with the Philadelphia 76ers for the season.
Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts for the rest of the Eastern Conference?
Yeah, so this has been one of the craziest off seasons that I can remember in a long time. Um, I don't even know where to start, but I guess the place is Brooklyn, right? So
Mm-hmm.
we have no idea effectively what's happening with Kevin Durant. I think the most likely scenario with him right now, talks have been going on about Phoenix, Miami, the Lakers throw their name in there as they do for every player. He's not going to be a Laker, not that I can see any pathway anyway. So Philadelphia has been rumored to be linked with Kevin Durant. I think that just about every team is going to pursue Durant. Now, as far as where he plays next season, I think there's a fair chance that both Kyrie and Kevin Durant start the season in Brooklyn. They've been adding some solid players kind of around the edge of the roster. TJ Warren just signed a deal with them. They just brought back Kessler Edwards. So there's definitely a pathway where Brooklyn is still, Brooklyn, they're still themselves still, they're still competitive and a possible contender. So they're definitely a team to still watch out for until the wheels fall off. They're still Brooklyn, basically. Boston's another team that just added Malcolm Brogdon. They have to be the title favorites right now in the East, at least. I can't see another team. I mean, Milwaukee's obviously going to be in the conversation. I think Philadelphia is going to be in the conversation. I don't have as much faith in Miami, even though they made the Eastern Conference Finals. The Bulls will take a look. They prove to be a little bit fake this year, but for me right now, it's a 3-man race with Boston as the favorite to not only win the East, but come out of the Eastern Conference Finals as well. So they're definitely a team. Toronto's only aging better and better. I could go on and on about so many teams. One other I did want to mention was Atlanta. A lot of change going on with them. DeJounte Murray, adding him on. Obviously, that big trade for Danilo Gallinari, and I want to say it was 4 first-round picks by the end of it, including swaps. Atlanta's looking to make big moves. So I think they're still probably a move or so away, but definitely a team to watch as we get closer to the deadline, for instance, to see if they can make that one other very big move to kind of bring in a star and kind of take that next level towards contention. So I would keep an eye on them as a sneaky team going forward. But the East is exciting, and it's such a breath of fresh air because for so long the West was the just farly superior conference over the Eastern Conference, and last season we saw the East was better. The obviously the Golden State Warriors won the NBA Finals, but pound for pound, when you look at the various different teams, the Eastern Conference was the most. It was better overall than the Western Conference was. They're the most consistent in terms of competitive teams, and so I think that we're going to see some more of that this upcoming season. Teams like Detroit have gotten better. There's definitely teams who are going to maybe not maybe not even surprise, but maybe impress is a better word. Just for the small jump that they might make. Teams that might be more competitive towards the play-in, for instance. But yeah, definitely a lot of excitement in the Eastern Conference, and nothing's going to come easy for Philadelphia. So they're going to have to, really make sure that they're dotting their I's and crossing their T's as far as their practice habits, when they actually do practice. And on top of that, if they have to make any additional moves, identifying them and then doing what it takes, whether that's a Kevin Durant or even something as simple as getting a true scoring 6-man option, like perhaps an Eric Gordon, whatever that could be.
Mm-hmm. As an early prediction, where do you have the Sixers standing in the playoffs for next season?
Yeah, it's a good question. I see them taking the 3rd seed. The way that I laid it out earlier, Boston, Milwaukee, Philadelphia, I do think that's kind of how it plays out. Philadelphia made the 4th seed last year, and that was without Ben Simmons and without James Harden for most of the season. So I think this team has only gotten better. Now, Milwaukee's still Milwaukee. Boston has gotten better than they were last season, and they went through a long period where they looked like even a bad team before they made the addition, bringing back Daniel Tice, trading away Dennis Schroeder, bringing in Derek White. So now that they have both Derek White, of course they lost Tice, but they have Malcolm Brogdon, which is definitely an upgrade, although they're completely different positions. I really think Boston is going to take the number 1 seed, and again they're the favorites to win, but there is still a chance that a Milwaukee, a Philadelphia, or some other surprise team could unseat them on the way. But for now, a top 3 seed for the Philadelphia 76ers and a team that is much better suited for the playoffs, I think they would take that heading into the year.
It's going to be very interesting to see how they do. And I thank you so much for taking the time to come on and talk Sixers basketball. And I would definitely have you back on once the season gets rolling.
Oh, sure. Yeah, no, I love it. I always love talking Sixers basketball and basketball in general, obviously, but Philadelphia, of course, it's my home team. That's who I follow, who I write about. You can check out my work on phillysportsnetwork.com, and now I'm also on section215.com, division of Fansided, on the coach site, expert there with Matty Bryce. So check us out there as well. But I love talking Sixers ball, and I love talking Sixers ball with you, Alex. So thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Thanks. You're welcome.